Howdy, Bashar. This is a response to that response to my response to your video. Sorry it took so long again, but this time I wound up a little bit under the weather, as well as having some personal things going on in the real world that required my attention. So between the two of those, I haven't had time to really make a video or answer your questions with any, proper degree. So, one of the first, you gave the example of the fella in the wheelchair at the door of the restaurant who seemed to be having problems, and the host wasn't helping him, and you made the comment to your friend about this. All right, first of all, you got to be careful about judging things by appearance alone, because it could very well be that fellow in the wheelchair is a regular customer in that restaurant. The host knows him, and that guy simply prefers to do things on his own and doesn't want help. And so the host wasn't helping him because he knows that the guy doesn't want help. He prefers to get that door open himself, even if it is a bit of a struggle. Which brings up a good point that you did not address directly, but helping someone that has a disability or handicap or is crippled up, to cover the gamut of the terms that I use in my normal speech. I used crippled almost exclusively in that last video, basically to make a point, and that was to take the edge off that word, because that's one of the terms that the PC crowds decide is offensive, and it's not. And that was to take the sharp edges off of that for folks. But when you see somebody, for example, when I'm getting in my car and I'm pulling the wheelchair in the parking lot, if somebody's walking by, usually they will stop and ask, do you need some help? And my answer is universally, no thank you, I've got it. One time I had a lady, this little tiny, just short, little old lady, must have been about 95 years old. Couldn't have been more than 4.5 feet tall and frail. And she insisted on helping me. And rather than taking 15 or 20 seconds for me to get the wheelchair into the car, it took 45 minutes. And she would not take no for an answer. And she's doing everything she can to help, but she's doing everything wrong. So if you see somebody that looks like they need help, by all means, offer. That offer will be appreciated, but don't jump in and start helping. Another example is I absolutely loathe having people push me. I know how big my wheelchair is. I know right down to the millimeter how big my wheelchair is. Okay? I know when I'm going to hit somebody in front, when I'm going to run over somebody's toes. I know all that stuff just from experience. And so I don't bump into people very much. The only time that happens is if somebody, steps in front of me unexpectedly. But if someone's pushing me, they don't know how big the wheelchair is, and they'll bang into people, especially like in a mall or something. They'll bang into people and stuff, and then those people get mad at me. Because believe me, when the foot pedals on my wheelchair hits you right in the ankle there, or in the Achilles tendon, that hurts. So if you want to help somebody out, offer. And if they say no, well, they don't want your help. They're not going to be mad at you because you offered. So that's that. Getting back to what you addressed directly in your video, the lady that rebuked you about using the term handicapped with that fellow at the door. I had something happen to me like that. Almost the same type of thing. The exception was I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's a quadriplegic, and she refers to herself as a gimp. Now, I do refer to myself as a cripple. And we were sitting there and laughing about the various predicaments that we've gotten ourselves in while in the wheelchair. That's not really that's not the only thing that we talked about, but on that particular day, that was the subject matter at hand. And this lady from a nearby table who had been eavesdropping decided it was her duty to come over and tell us about how insensitive and rude we were. And we sat there and listened to her for I don't know, a minute or a minute and a half, and then something she said just went so far over the top. We both just started cracking up, which shut her up because she didn't know what to make of this. And my friend looked at her and said, look, we're not going to hurt each other's feelings or get offended by anything we're saying here. So why don't you go sit your ass down and have your lunch and quit eavesdropping on other people's conversation. And then we went back to our conversation. This lady stood there for a second fuming because we weren't properly, we hadn't been properly educated by someone as wise as herself. And eventually stalked off to her own table again and undoubtedly had her entire lunch ruined because she hadn't succeeded in her job as one of the PC police. That's what you ran into, is one of these self-appointed PC police. These are folks that are generally not involved in any way with the group that they're deciding this is the term that they will be offended by, this is the term that they won't be offended by, etc. They're talking out their ass, dude. Don't pay any attention to them. What is the preferred term? There is no preferred term. Okay? I volunteered for 15 years at the Carrie Tingley Crippled Children's Hospital. Crippled Children's Hospital. Okay? Handicapped spaces. You nailed it on that one. There is no preferred term. I use the word crippled, handicapped, and disabled interchangeably in my conversation, depending on which one flows with the conversation the best, with the sentence the best. That's all. You had Marushka. Is that right? Yeah, Marushka talked about her initial shock with some lady that she helps out, and and the lady's husband, that refer to themselves as spastics. There is no preferred term. You said the idea that treat people that are crippled up the same way you treat anybody else is a beautifully simple but not comprehensive enough concept. And the beauty of it is it is comprehensive enough. It is all-encompassing. Okay? And I'll get more on that in a minute when we get to the deaf people that you have some problems with. Okay? But the next thing you got onto was the different categories of people that have disabilities. Strictly physical disabilities, well, you've got the whole range in that, from somebody who's had their leg amputated and has learned to use their fake leg, their prosthetic leg, well enough that you don't even notice that they've got a prosthetic leg. So you know, you probably know some people already that you're just unaware. And it's because they've learned to use that prosthetic limb well enough that it's pretty much undetectable. You did tag on a good point with the speech problems that people have when they have a brain injury or some disease that affects the nervous system. I would suggest that instead of assuming that their intellectual capacity is somehow diminished, and therefore starting at the bottom and working your way up in your conversation, in your level of conversation, you start out with just your normal level of conversation you would use with anybody and adjust it accordingly. Okay? If they are confused or not understanding what you're saying, you know to bring that level down a little bit. If they're obviously able to comprehend what you say and engage in a higher level of discourse, then you can bring that up a little bit. So just start with the average that you use with everybody and then adjust it accordingly. But don't make that, again, don't judge by appearance alone. Because when you think about it, speech is one of the most complex things that we do. You've got to adjust the throat shape. There's the way your soft palate is adjusted, the shape of the lips, the shape where your jaw is positioned, where your tongue is positioned. All of these things combined are what go into making speech. It's one of the most complex things that we do as human beings, is speech. So that's one of the things that is easiest to have damaged in some way. Now with Goth Reaper, it's a matter of her stammering over her speech as she has trouble getting the right word out, you know. But it's not a matter of her intelligence, because you can see that with her typed text and as well as with her artistic or informative videos that are so extremely well done. With Wheels, what I've noticed is that it's not the words that he uses, it's the rhythm of his speech, which is off from the norm because of his breathing patterns. So, like I say, start at the average and then adjust accordingly. Don't start at the bottom. Don't make the assumption that someone has a problem, because you're not going to offend somebody by speaking to them normally. Okay? Second category you got into was people that are disabled from birth versus folks who have had an injury or a disease that has affected them later on. That's just two paths to the same destination. And there's different experiences that we go through on those two paths. But someone who's been disabled from birth, they don't have as much negativity going on as you seem to assume, at least from everybody I've talked to. They do have to deal with not being able to participate in, you know, sports and things like that, but that's not ostracization. That's just the fact of life with their limitations. We had a kid in a wheelchair when I was in grade school and elementary school and junior high, and then he went to a different high school. And then in high school there was another guy that in the first part of the sophomore year, he was on the gym team, and he fell off the equipment somehow and broke his neck, became quadriplegic. Nobody treated him any different. As a matter of fact, his friends and such went out of their way. His friends and the teacher and the counselor and the principal and everybody made arrangements with the hospital and his parents, who hired a tutor so that he could keep up with his class. Okay? His friends took him in the homework and everything, and his class assignments, and helped him to do them. His tutor helped him with the subjects, replacing the role of his teachers. He had to take every test. He had to complete every assignment, you know. And he was a loquat, so he still had some use of his arms and hands. But he had to do all that stuff. And then when he came back to school after he had finished his initial recovery, he was actually something of a celebrity. You know. That status faded over time, and he just became another student wandering around. You didn't even notice him. It wasn't looking past him or anything. It was just, he was a normal part of the student population, and nobody even noticed anything special or different about him. So, you know, with people that are born with some disability or disease, you know, birth defect or disease, I haven't seen them suffering from being persecuted by others. And they have, I hate to call it an advantage, but in one way it is. They have the advantage of being able to adjust to their situation as they grow. With someone who is disabled later on, they are suddenly slammed into a brand new situation, and they have the problem of adjusting to that new situation. Now, you referred to the, I believe you said, oh, I forget exactly how you phrased it, but you basically justified their anger. There is a normal grieving process that someone goes through, but that doesn't give them the right to treat others like garbage. Okay? And ultimately, they end up in the same place as someone who's disabled from birth. You're both sitting there as adults, crippled up, and dealing with your problems. Some deal with it better than others. Most folks get to the point where they don't even notice it. So the people that I've noticed that are more bitter are the ones that were once healthy and have been injured, because they feel as though not all of them, but a small percentage of them feel as though they've been robbed somehow. Like life owes them good health, and they end up just being unhappy for their entire lives. Let's see. Okay, now we're going to get to your deaf group, and this is going real long, and I apologize for that, but again, this is a big subject. So, all right, the group as a whole. Now, you said that you have when you're around them, that you feel this sense of disgust and contempt emanating from them that is almost palpable. Assuming that interpretation is correct, I can think of 3 reasons off the top of my head why that might be. One has nothing to do with them being deaf at all, but just being kind of a private club, and they don't want to be interrupted, okay? If that's the case, picking a public place to hold their meetings is kind of stupid on their part, but I don't know. I haven't seen this group for myself. The second, and what is probably the most likely, is that most of those people are in their day-to-day lives perfectly decent, ordinary, nice people. But as happens with groups and group dynamics, you'll have someone that has a dominant personality in the group. In this group, someone who is apparently bitter, and that other people can hear. I mean, God forbid that people that people be allowed to actually hear, you know. But you probably got somebody in that group maybe a couple of people who have dominant personalities, and that bitterness ends up being emulated by the other people in the group. Not consciously, just subconsciously, you know, part of the group dynamics. If you've ever studied anything about that, you'll understand how that works. And the third possibility is you've got a whole bunch of people that are deaf that are bitter and angry at the world for daring to be able to hear, and have found each other and have gotten together and basically sit around bitching about how terrible life is. Well, poor little them. There's that world's smallest speech difficulties. There's that world's smallest violin playing just for them. Okay? Finally, this is the one I really loved. The lady with the door. You bumped her with the door. And we get full circle back to treating people just like anybody else. Okay, let's go in the Wayback Machine, as one friend of mine terms it. Go back in time to that day. You've got your cup of floppy coffee and napkins. Your hands are full. You're opening the door for your lady friend, wide enough for your lady friend to come through. And you accidentally bump this other lady with the door. Same lady with one difference. This time she can hear. Okay? You turn to her and you say, "I'm sorry." And she looks at you and goes, "I'm sorry," and gives you that hateful look and turns her back on you. What would your reaction be? I heard that story, and I mean, something like that would kick my smart-ass button so hard right away. I would have tapped her on the shoulder and gotten her attention, deaf or not. And I would have said, "Excuse me, but I'm curious. Did it hurt when they stuck that bug up your ass this morning?" And then I would have gone on my way. Okay? Because she's got a problem doesn't give her the right to treat you badly. And what I just described is exactly what she did to you. Okay? If she were a polite individual, when you apologized and made the sign for "I'm sorry," which I don't know any sign language, so you used an open hand. Apparently you're supposed to use a fist. If she were polite, she would have corrected you and shown you that closed fist in a polite fashion, been appreciative of your effort to use sign language, accepted your apology, and lets you go away feeling okay. Instead, she took that minor mistake, no major damage done, nothing permanent, just bumped her with the door. Big damn deal. I've been bumped with doors before. It's not anything big. I've been hit with cars before when somebody's not paying attention, looking right and turning left. You know, no big deal. As long as they don't slam into me at full speed, you know, it's always been a slow bump, but because somebody's got a problem, I don't care what that problem is, doesn't give them the right to treat you like crap. Okay? You're a nice guy. Your first video suggested it. Your second video confirms it. You've got a sense of empathy for others. You ain't got to worry about this crap. Okay? Deal with folks just as you would anybody else. The beauty of that is not only is it simple, but it is all-encompassing. So you don't need to worry about that. Okay? I'm going to end this here because we're way longer than I would like to be. But, again, you raised a lot of good points. Thanks for your response, and I'm looking forward to any further response you have from, well, anybody, you or anybody else. And we'll holler at you later. This is from Gimpy. And as far as hurry up goes, my speed of travel is generally faster than yours to begin with, so I would be the one that's telling you to hurry the hell up. Anyway, take it light, guy, and I'll talk to y'all later, and I hope everybody's having a good day. Hasta luego.